crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I'm here with a card for Create a Smile stamps. This card was inspired by a viewer question. I shared my ScanNCut video yesterday and somebody asked if you could cut out word stamps with the ScanNCut. And the short answer is yes, but they have to be connected completely. All the letters have to be connected. So here, this hello, the H is not connected to the rest of it, so it probably won't work. Whereas the Friends scripty greeting that I'm about to stamp, which is from Create a Smile as well, all of the letters are connected, so the ScanNCut is going to view it as one image, and it's going to cut pretty easily. I'm going to do the same exact thing with my machine as I did in yesterday's video. So I'm not going to show that because it's really hard to video my ScanNCut at work. But if you're interested in how to cut stamps simply with the ScanNCut, I will link that video and you'll follow the same exact process for cutting out the words and the images that I'm using in today's video. Because I am stamping in black, I'm going to recommend using the black and white setting on the ScanNCut, which will make sense if you've seen the other video or you're familiar. So you don't need to scan in color. It'll do just fine in black and white, and you can increase the contrast to help it recognize the word if need be, but I didn't find that it had any problem at all. I was able to send this Friends script greeting as well as the word coffee, which is also going to be in script, through my ScanNCut and had no problem. Now, when I was stamping, I couldn't quite get the end to be perfect, and rather than just stamping it like a whole bunch more times with my MISTI, I just took my black pen and filled in the areas that weren't stamping perfectly. And also there I was using a Tombow sand eraser to get a little smudge of ink off my paper. So those are some quick tips for little fixes that you can do. So like I said, I just used the same process as I did in yesterday's video, in my ScanNCut video, which will be linked. And I was able to stamp the word coffee from the Coffee First stamp set, also a Create a Smile stamp set. And I stamped and cut out a little coffee cup from the same stamp set. And I used a little bit of low tack tape to help keep my paper down. My paper was a little bit warped because I had heat set it. I really wanted the Friends or the large words to dry because I stamped them in VersaFine ink, which is a pigment ink and can take a little bit longer to dry. But as you can see, it cut out the word beautifully. The only issue was the word Friends obviously has a dot on the I, and in this instance the ScanNCut did not recognize the dot and attempt to cut it out. I don't know that that would always happen, but I'm just going to cut out the dot myself. It's not a big deal. You could try scanning it again until it recognizes it, and I think that would be similarly kind of hard even if you had a coordinating die to get those. A lot of times the word dies don't include things that have dots on the top like J's and I's because it does kind of mess with it a little bit in terms of trying to, because it obviously doesn't stick to the word of the die. Anyway, I am blending a background with Distress Oxide inks, and I'm going really fast in this part of the video because I'm sure you've seen people ink blend like a million times before. But I'm using Vintage Photo, Frayed Burlap, and Walnut stain. I am using Bristol Smooth cardstock. I much prefer Bristol Smooth cardstock for working with traditional distress inks and for working with Distress Oxide inks. I know different people have different preferences, but that's just mine. The lightest brown that I'm working with is Frayed Burlap. I didn't quite realize how dark each ink was, and I probably should have pulled out my ink swatches before I started. So I had covered about a third of it with Vintage Photo, and then I went on to Walnut stain, not realizing that Walnut stain was going to be a little bit darker. And so I wanted to go back and add a bit of Frayed Burlap. Basically though, I'm just trying to create a light to dark look. I think that generally you would do Frayed Burlap, Vintage Photo, Walnut stain to try to get a faded brown look. And the reason I'm choosing these three browns is because I'm going to have a coffee themed card. This is probably clear from the coffee sentiment and the little coffee cup. So now that I have that blended out, I will dry it with my heat gun, or you can set it aside to dry, and I'm going to pick a stencil from one of my Create a Smile stencils. I really adore their stencils, but one of my favorite ones from them is the set of coffee cups, which is going to be perfect because the coffee cup design on the stencil is the same one that I stamped and cut out with my ScanNCut. So everything's going to coordinate really nicely. And what I'm about to do here is basically stamp with water with the stencil. So I wasn't quite sure how to do it at first, and I think there's been other videos on how to stamp with a stencil. I'm not like pretending like I came up with this technique, but the way that it occurred to me at the time was to put my stencil over like a plastic scrap would have been better, but I had that large piece there. Spritz it so it's wet. Then I put it on a piece of plastic so that it wouldn't ruin my paper pad that's on my work surface. But if you're working with a craft mat, you don't need to worry about any of that. But spritz it and then just bring just the wet stencil. You don't want the place that you're sort of stamping against to be wet any longer. And you press the paper, the oxide paper, into the stencil, and it's going to oxidize only the wet stencil areas. And that's why it's important that your surface isn't still wet, because otherwise it's going to oxidize everything. So I just kind of push it into that wet stencil, and I actually used a paper towel to pull up some of the ink. I find that that was better than letting it air dry because it makes the impression of the stencil a bit more clear. If you were just to air dry it or hit it with a heat gun, you'd leave some more of that ink on the oxidized areas and they wouldn't have lightened up as much. Once I have my background ready to go, I'm going to color in my coffee cup image with Copics, and I thought I would talk about this briefly just because there's a tip or two here or there, and I'm not going to take much time in this coloring. With the coffee cup, to make the cup appear rounded, you're going to want to put your shadows on the edges of the cup, the left and right side of the cup, because things that are lighter appear closer to you. And when I'm coloring, I like to start with my lightest color, but leave the center white. I don't want to bring my lightest color all the way to the center yet. Instead, I want to only use my lightest color as a quick pass through of the center. Now, I wanted a deeper shadow. I was working with BG 13 and 15, as you can see there, but I wanted a darker shadow, and so I actually went all the way to BG 75, which might seem kind of scary at first because it's a lot darker, but as I've mentioned in past videos, if the ending number is the same, they can blend pretty easily. So because it's BG 75 and BG 15, they both end in that 5, they actually blend pretty well. And then I used the 13 to create the lightest area, and as you can see, there's a clear, distinct light area because I left that area white for as long as possible and only ran over that area maybe once with the brush. I personally really like the look of teal with browns, and so since I knew this was going to be a coffee card and my background was going to be brown, I decided to use teal and red. I think those both work really well, and I wanted the coffee cup to be a real like pop of color in the corner of the card. And I'm going to use my R46 for the simple red heart, no shading there, a little bit of shading on the stripe, and that was C1 and C0. So I have placed my background on a black mat, and my card is going to be A2, the black mat is going to be 5 1/4 by 4, and then the brown piece is going to be 5 by 3 3/4, so a 1/4 inch shorter each time. And there must have been some glitter left on my stencil because when I did the technique, even though I only used water, it came out kind of shimmery. So that was kind of just like a bonus surprise that I have a shimmery background. Now I'm going to start assembling the card. This is obviously the simplest part here, but I am going to create a custom sentiment with these two words. So I wanted to show you that briefly. I wanted to say friends and coffee are, and there's a couple of different sayings in the friends set that I'm working with. There's like are magical, are better than unicorns, are superheroes. So I wasn't sure which one I was going to pick, but I needed the word and first. Now you could write in the word and or find any and stamp that you happen to have. I chose the and smiles from the hello stamp set from Create a Smile, and then I just stamped the and. I took a piece of tape that was just sitting on my desk. I covered the word smiles and inked up the stamp. Then I stamped it down after removing the tape so that only the and would stamp. I found that I must have pressed a little too hard and I kind of smeared my and, so I just traced it with black marker. Black tuxedo memento marker will like save the day. It's already saved this card like 2 times in the friend sentiment and in the other sentiment. So I'm going back to the friend set and I'm going to pick one of the sayings. I didn't know which one I was going to use until I kind of saw how it fit on the card. So I'm going to say friends and coffee are the best because that was about the right size to finish off my card, and then it's finished. So thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you are interested in more craft tutorials, be sure to subscribe to my channel. As mentioned, I'll link the ScanNCut video as well as the products that I used and the Create a Smile blog in the video description below, as well as social media links and my card classes, etc. Thank you so much for watching. Have an awesome day.